Welcome to our Mobilizing Leadership production of Living Leadership. This series works from the premise that leadership is not a title, but a mindset. Filmed in one take, it explores how people navigate beyond the status quo and captures their insights on what leadership looks like across their work, life, and community. The Discovery Whiteboard session is facilitated by Stuart Morse, and we welcome our guest. Welcome to another Living Leadership interview. We're here with Nathan Moreno. Nathan, introduce yourself.
Well, like you said, my name is Nathan Moreno. I am the Director of IT for SPAN Construction and Engineering. I have been working with SPAN for going on 19 years now, and it's been quite the ride and quite the experience.
Very good. So Nathan, we talk about, when we think about leadership, it's not so much about a title, but it's more of a mindset. How does that show up for you in your work, your life, community?
Being, managing a department for so long, I've been an IT manager, now director, but since 1996. It's been a long time, and managing, and then being a father, and that kind of thing. So it's more of a mindset of not just telling somebody what to do, but really taking the lead in something, getting in there with them, and that way you can share their experience with them and they can share it with you.
So is this idea of what I'm hearing you say is lead with them or doing it together?
Correct. The way I see it, the way I've always saw the difference between being a leader and just simply being a manager is, may I draw?
Oh, absolutely.
So I always thought of, you have this, almost like looks like a chariot, right? And you have this guy and he's pointing, and then you have people, trying to pull on this cart.
Chariot.
Right. So a manager saying, go. Right. Whereas a leader,
Here's a racer.
Yeah, a leader is more than just that.
Right.
A leader is, hey, let me show you how to do it.
Right. And you're out and you're with them.
And right. So the leader is right here, right? And so that I find is a lot more effective. Mm-hmm. And not only that, but you get more alignment.
Okay, so out of that you get alignment. What else comes from that by doing it like that?
Well, it gives those who you oversee, they feel like, hey, you're in there with me. You're not just somebody in the proverbial
Right.
white tower just directing, but you're in there, leading.
Right.
Rather than and not necessarily that I'm going to be in the weeds with them, but really, let's go on a journey. Follow me. I'll show you how to get there. Show you what to do along the way, so
Right.
that way you won't really need me to be helping you pull. You'll be able to pull yourselves because you learned.
Okay, so part of this is I guess it's everything is that everybody's learning to pull themselves, right?
Correct, but there's more. There's another layer to that.
Okay.
Because if you look at this the way it is, I'm leading, but I'm also training the person behind me how to lead, and with the expectation that now
so
they're
are you passing that like this and
correct. And then the thinking is that as people are filling the spot, the people in front of them will learn from the person in front of them as a leader, and then that way they too can then. So it's that way you always have that continuous learning.
it's almost like it's cascading?
Correct.
Okay. So we use this term. When you talk about this, we use this term collective leadership. I mean, is that kind of what you're going towards here? Or is that more the outcome from it? I mean, what happens when you start creating this cascading and leadership is cascading through people? What starts to happen across the whole group, or even the thing you're trying to pull?
Well, the thing is that when you do that, it feels like it empowers them to make decisions, to feel comfortable enough to make decisions without being afraid of, should I do this? Should I do that? You know what I mean? So
you get it empowers people.
It empowers them to go ahead and go without being too afraid or having a bottleneck and I don't know what to do, or I'm not sure if I should do this or should do that, because along the way they've learned, oh, I can do this, I know how to do this.
So it gives them almost, I'm hearing you say it's almost confidence, or it helps them stay unstuck, or...
Well, yeah, and depending on what the role is, but yeah, in other words, it does that, right? So as a leader, you give certain authority to those, so that way they can go ahead and do their jobs or do their work. But also, it also shows them and how this person can delegate to these, and how to lead, and how to say, hey, you now have the authority to do this, whatever task that they have, right?
Right. So what I'm hearing you say is you start with this, but then as it cascades down, it's not so much about you out front pulling. It's what happens in that when all of a sudden, people, this starts cascading and they start empowering, they're taking ownership. What do you find, does your role shift then, or does it,
As a leader?
what happens? Yeah.
Well, absolutely. So what happens is once this person feels confident in taking the lead, then I could step back and let them pull without me having to be even really directly assisting with this, because now I get to focus on maybe bigger items.
So you initially show up and say, hey, create this environment.
Right.
And then as it starts to cascade, then you adjust your role.
Correct.
And when you would, so that what it starts out is, I got to try to find how I'm going to draw this. This leader, I'm going down to try to find real estate. So you start one way, and then which I guess would be more of a formal, more of a traditional type, hey, we come in and lead the room. You start, but that's more traditional, and then you migrate, right? And so what's that? And then that evolves into, how would you describe this second or the next place that you...
Well, it's interesting. You had said something regarding the responsibilities of the executive team and the value team, right?
Yeah.
And I share that with my team. So with the executive team, you had drawn basically like this diagram that says
right.
The executive team is 75% on the business, 25% in the business. Value team is 75% in the business, right. 25% on the business, right? So the executive team's responsibility is to oversee and see the big picture for the company as a whole.
Right.
Well, now since I oversee...
So that's maybe that first place.
Well, so then when I talk to my team, I tell them the same thing. Now in my case, I'm 75% on the department, 25% in, and you are 75% in the department, 25% on. So that way I can focus on the bigger picture.
Okay, so you start traditional, so you can move to this on versus in, right? So
Correct.
you can spend more time. Let's say, from what you said, 75%, or as an example, to
Correct.
25% in. So you can, as you said, you can kind of step back because they've got it. Okay, and you're watching the bigger picture.
Correct. A good example is spending the 2 days with our quarterly leadership meetings, right? In the past, it was very difficult for me because I was still having to manage and do things and make sure things are taken care of.
Right.
And so my attention
so
was
you were
divided.
kind of in this space a lot.
A lot, right? And until I finally got someone who stepped up and it was ready to take on that more of a leadership role within the department, where I didn't really have to worry about it. I was able to focus most of my time on the importance of the leadership meetings and not have to worry about, is this getting taken care of? Because I knew that he's shown that he can handle it.
Okay. So what do you see happen? So what are you watching as these, you start watching this cascade of the concept of leadership in these individuals? What are you watching for as you see this environment grow and evolve? You've started it, you've created it, starting to cascade, you're able to do this. And then what are those elements of that kind of that leadership mindset that you're watching for? Is this almost like the culture of leadership, right? That is, what are those elements that you're watching for to see if it's really that it's, what's the word, that it's rich, that it's producing the type of...
I've seen it, I've witnessed it, right? So I've seen where this person here is unsure of something, of whatever it might be, a decision or something they're working on or whatever the case is. And so the instinct is, well, why don't you ask your boss, or why don't you ask, me or whoever's leading.
Right.
But instead it's like, you know what? Let me take the time to show you. I'll stop what I'm doing so that way you.
So this idea of they're mentoring.
Correct. Right. And so they say, hey, you know what? Let me go ahead and walk you through it, or that way they feel comfortable that they can go to any one of them and they feel empowered enough to go ahead and take that lead without saying, should I take the lead here? Should I do? No.
So I almost want to add to your drawing that what you're watching for is to see if there's this churn that's happening between them. It's one thing cascade down, but are there these relationship feedback loops?
Yeah.
People getting feedback. Would that be fair to say, to put those arrows in like that's starting to happen?
Exactly, right?
Okay.
I mean, one of the things that we talk about just as the value team and executive team leadership, departments working in silos, this is what I do, I'm doing my job, I don't have time for this, I'm just gonna focus on this and that's it, right? Whereas this is my job, but at the same time, I'm also part of something, right?
Right.
And that there's nothing wrong with, hey, you need help, or hey, I need help. It's okay to ask. It's okay
Right.
to have that type of communication with one another.
So it's okay to ask, and it's okay to and have communication, right?
Yeah.
With one another. So while this is happening, when you just personally with yourself, we find out that everybody creates their own. It's almost like leadership's like an art form, right? That everybody kind of adjusts it, makes it their own. What are you watching in yourself? This kind of this self-awareness when this going on. What are you watching for in yourself too?
Honestly,
as this happening.
So I'm the type where I need to get my hands dirty. I want to be right in there, right? And it's an instinct, and I got to go against it. I got to stop myself. I got to let them be. I got to let them learn. I got to let them make mistakes. I mean, obviously within reason.
Right.
Without having to interfere, or because I feel if I do that, it may stunt their growth or slow it down because they start to use me as a crutch. And I have to, I need to have them use their creative side, not just the strategy and this is what I'm going to do, and then they're kind of just narrow, right? Like the horse with blinders. But rather, if they confront a problem, have them try and figure out, what do I do? How do I do this? Let me see if I can figure out on my own. And if they still need help, well then yes, then we'll be there to assist.
So what's that first thing is it that, are you kind of giving yourself a pause button, or you saying
Yes.
okay?
I got to stop myself because my instinct is to jump in there.
Stop my instinct.
There's a trope with it's not so much anymore, but it used to be with IT guys, where instead of showing the user, here's the issue you're having, let me show you how you can be self-efficient. They're like, okay, move, and then they get in there and
Let me do it.
Yeah, let me do it, and they kind of put their shoulder and block the person, and job
And the
security.
other person's going,
right.
You're moving too fast.
Or they don't even want them to see, right? They just there's just that's a trope, right? It's to just jump in there and do it rather than if they don't know how to do it at all, then you say, hey, let me show you how to do this, and then that way it empowers them to be self-efficient. It's the same thing with when you have leading direct reports.
So it sounds like you're watching that in yourself too. I mean,
Right.
When you describe that, I go back to the beginning of our conversation. That's this initial thing. It's almost like, hey, wait a minute, stop myself, my instinct to solve. Second is, now I was going to say use their creative. You had said use their creative side, but are you also doing that with yourself too? You're maybe I shouldn't put that around self, but you're trying to. And I'll go ahead and put it here, use their creative side, but there's, you're wanting not to jump in, but are you also, is there something else that you're around this thing that you were talking about, this thing about, hey, let me just do it, let me fix it. I assume you're kind of watching that in yourself, right?
Yeah.
Hit and pause.
And also, and I think you know me well enough now that I have a sense of humor, and sometimes my humor can be dry, it could be a little sarcastic. And there's times where it's appropriate and relevant, and it's good to use it. Can kind of it helps with the tension, especially if they're feeling overwhelmed. But there's also a time where it makes things dramatically worse if it's used. So it's one of those things where I see the situation, I see someone who's starting to get, and I try to diffuse, like, don't, to try and.
So you're trying to lighten
it up, but what happens is it ends up making light of what they're feeling. And like it almost feels like I'm being dismissive.
So in that moment, what do you?
I don't say it. Like I'm like thinking like I want to say something, and I'm like, okay, if I say this, then after learning.
So you're really watching yourself.
I have to watch in the moment, because there's times where humor really comes in handy, and it really kind of just relieves that. I'm like, don't worry about it, man. Hey, and then because they're so down on themselves because they made a mistake, or I had a direct report that made a pretty big mistake recently, and man, they were just beside themselves, and I'm like, okay, how do I then, we have the energy level, like where are they at right now? I mean, right now they're like at a 1. They're like, I'm ready to give up. I'm thinking I'm done. And I'm like, how do I get them to that? I could use humor. I could do this, and I did use humor. I'm like, you know what, man?
So you're adjusting while you're watching yourself. You're adjusting strategies.
And myself, because of and sometimes I could be a little blunt. Sometimes especially if I'm under stress and I'm, and I just need them to do something.
Right.
Sometimes I can be very direct, which can be very jarring because I'm not usually like that, right? I'm not. Right. I usually I feel I'm pretty low key, but when I'm under stress, which happens, sometimes I don't take the time. I'm just like, I need this and do it now. Well, no, I need it now.
So you're almost giving yourself time. I mean, this idea that, or maybe you're watching to yourself on, hey, how much time do I need to think through this?
Right. And and it's fluid, and it depends on the situation, but those are the things that my mind's constantly like, okay. What's going on? What should I say? Sometimes not saying is more valuable than saying.
Right. So when we look at this, what we've created here in the dialogue, is there anything else that you would add to this that you think we don't have in here?
I'm sure there is. I have all these things swirling in my head, but really, I mean, to me, this is just the definition of a leader for me can be broken down to literally this simple concept.
Right.
How do you lead? What's the difference between a leader and a manager? Because there are instances where you just need a manager.
Yeah.
I need you to do this, do it this way, and just do it.
Right.
So, yeah, did I hit the mic?
No, you're good. All right. Well, Nathan, thank you very much.
Yeah.
Very enlightening. Love your diagram. Grab the marker and go.
Yeah.
Nathan, thank you very much.
Yeah, of course, man. I appreciate it. I appreciate you, Stuart.
Sure.
As always.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you to our guest and the Sprint Ahead Mobilizing Leadership people who are collectively working to create leadership for all through shared purpose, connected communities, new opportunities to learn, and action-based leadership experiences. We look forward to hearing your insights. Please connect and move forward with us.